What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I go by the name of Keith, and on today we are going to be mixing lead vocals with just stock plugins inside of Cubase. Let's go. So today we are going to be mixing some vocals with stock plugins inside of Cubase. Now, when we say stock plugins, what we mean are the plugins that come with your digital audio workstation, your DAW, when you first purchase it. So these are not third-party plugins. All of these plugins are specific to Cubase. I am using Cubase 12 for this tutorial, Cubase 12 Pro. So whatever version of Cubase you have, a lot of the plugins should be the same. Maybe one or two that aren't in all the different versions that Cubase offers. But once again, this is Cubase 12 Pro. And we are actually going to go through some of the plugins that you can use to achieve some great sounding vocals for whatever mix you're working on. Also, this video isn't a how-to when it comes to plugins and tools that we use to mix or to just create the music that we create. It's easy to just find somebody and mimic exactly what they're doing, but when it comes to plugins, you want to know what plugins are actually doing what you need them to do, and what plugins are actually doing what you don't need them to do. You just want to know what the plugins are actually doing. It's not a one-size-fits-all type of thing. Whatever project you're working on, whatever genre you're working on, the artist, the mood, the vibe, all of those things determine what plugins you should use, how you should use it. You should never just slap plugins on a chain just because somebody told you to slap them on. You need to be considerate of a lot of other things. So the song we're going to use today is a song that's already out by an artist named Kadaysha. It's called Petty Boy. I already mixed the song. It's already out, but I wanted to go back through this song and just use stock plugins to achieve somewhat of the same goal that I'm already achieving with my other plugins. So let's jump into the session. Okay, cool. So now we are in the session of Petty Boy by Kadaysha, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just hit play. This is the actual session. I'm going to hit play. These are the plugins that I did use, the third-party plugins and stuff like that. And what I'm going to end up doing is stripping everything off, take everything off, and we're going to start from scratch and build the vocals back up from then. So I'll play a little bit of the second verse, and then we'll go straight into the chorus. And this is a little bit of what it sounds like.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth, what would they say? You could've told me how you was feeling. I know you see my heart bleeding.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the same exact vocal. I'm literally going to clear everything in the sends. I'm going to clear all of the inserts that I have. Right? The one thing that I won't do is I'll keep my gain where it is, only because I gain stage before I do anything with the vocals, and before I mix any instrument, gain stage, and so that can stay the same. So let's listen to this, just the main vocals. So I'll mute all of the background vocals for right now. I'll mute them so that we just don't hear it, and let's just take a listen to the main vocal and what we hear.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If
Cool. So that's the vocals raw. I'll play a little bit of it just in solo so you get another picture.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it.
Cool. So now you get an idea of what the vocals sound like just raw. So when we mix, we always want to make sure that we are mixing, listening to the whole mix as one, and we want to solo the vocal here and there just to find some problematic frequencies, just to find some things that are going on, correct a few things, but we really want to make the most of our decisions when we're in the context of the mix. So the first thing I like to do with any mixes, I try to fix any problematic issues that are going on, any frequencies that are too present that sound harsh, or to say if there's too much low end, or it just sounds muddy, or the vocal isn't level, isn't at a consistent level volume wise or dynamic wise before I even get to a compressor. So those are the type of things that I look for first when mixing a vocal. You want to look for just the problematic things, because if you put a compressor on anything, all you did was make that problem much larger. So we want to just correct everything that we can correct off the bat. So the first item in this chain, what we are going to do is we're actually going to use the frequency plugin from Cubase. It is a 8-band, this is the frequency 2 plugin. It's an 8-band EQ. And the very first thing we want to do is we want to do some filtering, right, or some passes, just so that the information from the low end that we don't need, so rumbles in the microphone or any room noise that we don't need actually in the vocal, we want to get rid of that. So that's the first thing that I do. So what we're going to do first is we're going to come to this first band, and we're going to change the input to cut 48. All of the cuts right here are just the different slopes that the pass, that the actual cue will actually jump to. So 96 is more of a dramatic incline or decline of a slope as such. 48, 24, 12, you get the picture. I do 48. 48 is nice. I like to be a little bit aggressive with slopes, only because if I really don't want those frequencies, then I just really do not want those frequencies at all. So I'm going to hit play to the track, and then we're just going to move this up until I feel like it's in the right point to where we're eliminating everything we don't need in the vocal, and we are just left with, you know, the things that we do need in the vocal. So we don't want to take too much of the low end out, but we do want to take all the room noise and the frequencies we don't need out of the vocal.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth.
All right, cool. So I did roll it off a little past 200. So when it comes to female vocals, a lot, especially with this artist Kadaysha that I do a lot, I do roll off a tidbit more than what I normally would roll off when it comes to male vocals, just because the register of male vocals obviously is a little bit lower. So we wrote off at 246 hertz. That is kind of a lot, but in the context of the mix, it worked. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do some subtractive EQ, and what this is just finding those frequencies that stand out, that we don't want to stand out, and what we are going to do is we're going to bring them down a notch or a couple of notches, just to make sure that before we put a compressor on, that these frequencies don't stand out and that are a distraction to the vocal. So let's hit play and just do that.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they know the truth, easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind. Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish. Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth, easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. Easier to stay than.
All right, cool. So I applied some subtractive EQ. Now, oftentimes, a lot of harsh frequencies lie close to 3K. So I'll play it with the subtractive EQ and without so you can hear it.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was
We'll do that in solo.
easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it.
You can hear a difference when I play it with the subtractive EQ and without the subtractive EQ, how the vocal starts to take shape. So the next thing that we're going to do is that we are going to add a compressor. And all the compressor does is reduce the span between the loudest part and the softest part of the signal. And we use that to make vocals, sound more so in your face, or just to tame the dynamic so that you get the actual gist of what the vocal is doing. We don't want to over compress something, because once you over compress it, then you lose the dynamics and it will be lifeless. You can just hear the audio, but it will be lifeless and you really can't feel it. And like I said in the beginning, depending on what you're dealing with and how something is recorded will depend on how you use the tool that you're using. This vocal was recorded through a 76 before, a hardware 76 before we even mixed it. Therefore, I'm not going to go heavy on the compression at all. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a compressor. And for our stock compressor, we're going to use the Vintage Compressor Mark III. So this is a vintage style compressor. It's really cool, really easy. It has a nice sound to it. I like using this if I have to use stock plugins. So this is going to be my plugin of choice for this section. So what we are going to do is we are going to adjust the input. We're going to adjust the attack, the release, and a few other options, and we are going to see how we can shape this vocal. As a good ratio, I try to stay around 4:1, so we'll just do a 4:1 ratio, and then we'll start messing with the different knobs and parameters to see what type of gain reduction we get. So let's hit play and let's do this in the mix.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth. Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth. Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for
right, cool. So if you saw what I was doing, I was adjusting the input under the 4-to-1 ratio to a point to where we got roughly around, on average, 3 to 4 dB of gain reduction. We don't want to reduce it too much. Like I said, this was compressed on the way in. I don't do heavy compression on the way in, but it was compressed on the way in. So we're doing around 3 to 4 compression, and at the most, it hits around 6, maybe 7 dBs of gain reduction. And when dealing with a compressor, as you adjust the input and get your gain reduction, you don't want to just make sure you're just increasing volume, because just because something is louder doesn't mean it's better, and it doesn't mean you're actually utilizing that tool to the best of its ability. All right, so the next thing that we are going to add inside this vocal chain is we are going to add a de-esser. And what a de-esser is, all it is a compressor for the high end, in a sense. So it tames all of the high ends, all the sibilant things that we say. So things with a S, things with a T sometimes, anything that has a lot of air or a lot of sibilance to it, it tames that. So as our stock de-esser, we are just literally going to use the de-esser. The de-esser by Steinberg. So I'm going to hit play, and what we're going to do is we're going to find the frequencies in which those S's, those sibilant frequencies, are really prevalent, and we are going to reduce them. So I'm going to hit play, and we are going to adjust those. So here we go.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. You were selfish, you proved it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hands. Me so blind for it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't. You were selfish, you proved it. 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 But I couldn't.
So cool. That is a good place where I want to be with my de-esser. It did take me a little bit, but what you want to try to achieve is that you can hear the S of these words or the sibilant frequency of the word, but it doesn't sound as if someone has a lisp. So you definitely want to mix it in the mix so that you actually get an idea of that. You don't want to over de-ess, because once you over de-ess, you don't understand the words that are coming out of the mouth. But we can still understand the word that she's saying, but we're not de-essing too much. So I'll play it again.
You were selfish, you proved it.
So selfish.
You were selfish, you proved
Without.
You were selfish, you proved.
So it takes a little bit off the S in selfish. So it does a lot for the sibilant frequency. So this is a plugin you could use with your stock plugins as a de-esser. So the plugins that we used first, the frequency plugin, the vintage compressor, and the de-esser, those plugins were to fix problems or to get the vocal to a nice sitting place. After we get it to a nice place where, now this is like real ground zero for us to start being creative and add tones to it, this is where I start to add some tonal value to the vocal. So what I like to do next is I like to add saturation. So when we talk about saturation in a hardware sense, it's when the components of the hardware are being overworked that it starts to add distortion. And when it adds distortion, what that is doing is adding a different tone and different characteristics to the actual vocal. It's actually changing the waveform of what's actually there, adding harmonics like even harmonics and odd harmonics to the actual signal that is there. So this is a good way to add tonal value to shape the vocal in the way you want it to sound. So what I'm going to use as my stock saturation plugin is we're going to use Magneto 2. So this is actually decent sounding plugin for a stock plugin. I actually use this plugin often, even when I'm using third-party plugins and stuff, this is a good saturation plugin. We're using it on the vocal. This is a good tape style type plugin that you can use on buses as well. Works very good on buses. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to shape some of this vocal up so that it sits better in the mix. It sounds a lot better. It has a little bit more harmonics than what we see, than what we hear. So let's just hit play and let's start shaping this vocal up. So here we go.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth, easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth, easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray.
So cool. So this is a good place where I want to be with this saturation plugin. So I'm not adding too much saturation to this vocal, but I'm adding enough. You can hear that when I'm adding it in, the vocal stands out a little bit more, especially in the low end. You feel the low end come in, especially on this plugin. We do have the high frequency adjust button. You click this and you adjust this knob, and it's almost like another EQ, but it adds more distortion to the higher end wherever you have your high end threshold fixed. So between these two knobs, you have your low and your high, and basically anything in between these two knobs, frequency wise, is what's being affected. And then the saturation, this is actually your mix knob. So this just says how much saturation you want. So I have it at 54%, which kind of isn't bad at all. In most cases, I'll do less saturation. With a lot of third-party plugins, I feel like they go overboard with saturation, so I find myself using less percentage. But here, you can definitely hear it. Not oversaturating a plugin. If you do oversaturate a plugin, sometimes what you do hear is a lot of the added harmonics and not the actual vocal. So it's almost like not the actual melody of what the signal is doing, but you're getting a lot of the other harmonics, and sometimes that sounds like it's washed out, like it has no body to it, in other words. So the next thing I want to do with this vocal is I want to add some more high end to the vocal so that the vocal has a nice sizzle or a nice sheen, a nice shine to it. So what we're actually going to do is we're actually going to grab another EQ, right? This time we're going to grab the Studio EQ. Okay, so it's very similar to the frequency EQ, though the Studio EQ is only 4 bands. I don't need a lot of bands for this. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the top end. So we're going to go to the 4th band, and we're going to choose Shelf 2. I like this slope a little bit better. We're going to hit play. We are going to do a little bit of sweeping and boosting of the high end until we find the sweet spot where the vocal shines through the mix. So let's hit play and let's do that.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth, easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it.
All right, cool. So we just added some high end, some sheen to the top end using this fourth band in the studio EQ. The only thing that I would say is you don't always have to use an EQ to add shine and sheen to a vocal. Just like in the plugin that we used before in Magneto 2, how it does have this high frequency adjuster, you can add a lot of high end frequencies and sheen and shine with a saturation plugin, which I do quite a bit. You just want to be careful with the saturation plugin. Sometimes you introduce a lot more than you're actually willing to live with in the end result. But we did add enough sheen and shine here just by boosting around 6.2 dB. And we are sitting around 5.7 kilohertz. This is actually low, but this EQ for me, I had to go a little bit lower rather than sitting around 8 to 10K and up. Had to go a little bit lower just to get the sheen and the shine that I want. Each plugin works different. Each EQ is not built the same. So now the next thing that we want to do is I like to add a little bit of body to vocals. When I listen to a lot of the records that I love listening to, the vocal sounds very much so present in your face, right? And we can use compression to do that a lot. And oftentimes I notice how, if somebody is speaking to you close up, you can audibly hear the low end in their voice. You can audibly hear the top end of their voice, right? So I try to replicate that same factor. So we're going to add a little bit of a body, what we call it, a little bit of mid-range, some body to the vocal so that it does sit more in our face directly. So what we are going to actually do is what we are going to do now, we're going to use the same EQ. We're just going to stay inside this plugin and we're going to add some body to it. For me, the body in the mid-range lives between 500 and 2K depending on which vocal you're dealing with. So I'm going to hit play, and what we want to do is just boost a little bit of whatever frequency we find that gives us the body. For the body, I do like using a wider band of EQ more than a narrow EQ that's not surgical. We want to add tone, so we want to shape. Whenever I think of shape, we want to think wide bands, wide Qs. And whenever we're talking about fixing or correctly, we want to think narrow Qs. So we're just going to keep this Q at 1 where it is. We're going to hit play, and we'll just sweep through here a little bit, and let's try to find what sounds pleasing to us, and let's go from there.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to. Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth. Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it.
Yeah, so right there at 647 hertz, I boosted at 3.7 dB. It gives a little bit more of the body back in the vocal in the mid-range, and that's kind of like what I like to hear. Usually in a third-party plugin type sense, I'll be using like a Pultec EQ or some type of tonal shape EQ to give me this effect. But as right here, we're at 647 hertz. Just added just a touch of presence just back in there, of body back in there, and that's how we want to add body to this vocal using the studio EQ.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling.
Okay, cool. So the next thing that we want to do is what I like to do is I like to add another compressor after I add sheen and or body to a vocal. So basically after I'm done adding tonal EQ characteristics, I like to add another compressor. And with this compressor, what we want to do is just make sure there's no peaks that are leaking through at the very loudest moments or at the very quietest moments that were added because of the saturation or added because of the EQs or whatever other plugin that we use to add tone to. And we might have just added more harmonics too. So we're going to add another compressor. So for this compressor, we'll go with the tube compressor. The tube compressor from Steinberg. So this compressor, we're still adding some tone with this tube compressor, but what we want to do is we want to just tame some of the dynamics that were introduced because of the saturation and because of the boosting of the EQ that we have done. So like we did with the vintage compressor, we're going to play around with the input knob. This definitely has a drive knob, which adds a lot of saturation components. We'll hear how it sounds, and we might mess with this just a little bit as well. We're going to keep the ratio low. We're going to keep the auto release on off. We're going to keep the ratio low because we're not using this for like real compression. We're using this just as almost like a safety measure in a sense, to just make sure everything is cohesive and even. So we'll hit play and let's do the tube compressor and see where we go with that.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth. Easier to stay than to move on. Forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth. Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept. If they knew the truth.
So we can hear what kind of difference that this made. We are just getting around 2 dBs of gain reduction. And when I toggle this on and off and when I bypass it, you can actually hear a difference in the way how the vocals sit. So I'll play it without and then I'll add it back in. Let's hear it again.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it.
Cool. And I have the attack not too fast because we don't want to kill the transients. We want some of the transients to actually come through. The release is sitting just around the same spot, not too fast, not too slow. We don't have the character knob driven. The character knob and the drive knob, these two knobs do give a bit of tonal quality. So you know what? Let's just see what that sounds like while we're here. Let's go.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hints. Had me so blind, forgot how to. Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved, telling me we would get through it. I was
Cool. So I just put the drive knob at 3 dB. It has just a little bit more saturation and tonal quality, but we're still getting 2 to 3 dBs of gain reduction, and that's kind of where we want to be with the tonal shape. All right, cool. So now after we're done fixing the problems, number one, and then number two, adding tonal value and shape to the vocal, now we can start adding some effects. So the first thing that we want to do with our effects are, we are actually going to send our effects. So we're not going to put any of our effects on the actual vocal. We're actually going to use a separate bus and send our audio signal from our vocal track to that bus, to those effects tracks. So the first thing we want to do is we want to send this main vocal to a stereo, I like to use a stereo delay. This gives the vocal a little bit more width. So yeah, so we'll do that. Let's go with the stereo delay first. And which we'll actually choose, we'll just, we'll send this to stereo delay, which sends it all the way down here to our effects channels, to this stereo delay channel. If we click this, let us use for a stereo delay. Stereo delay by Steinberg. Here we go. Stereo delay. So with the stereo delay, what we want to do is we want to get a little bit of width in our vocals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit play. I think what we want to do is I want to change some of these parameters to make it sound better. So I try to do the left ear different than the right ear, just because if it's stereo, then why not play with the stereo field and give you some interesting sound. So let's go 100 mix on the left. Let's go like 85 on the right. So close, but not too far away. We'll leave the feedback both at 50, which is honestly kind of a lot for me. But let's just see where we get with it. I do like in my delays, I do like for it to be synced. If you click these synced buttons, these actually sync to the divisions of what the actual BPM is. So on the left, let's go with a 16th note. On the right, let's go with a 16th triplet. So it's not the same. So it's close. Let's just hit play and hear our sound.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it.
So you hear how delayed it is. What we actually want to do is, on our vocal track, we can actually turn down the amount of signal we're sending to our delay track, our stereo delay. So let's just turn this down to a point where we actually just get width and it's not actually seeming like a delay. So let's do that.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hands. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew, easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But
So cool, you hear a little bit of delay, but you actually don't hear it so much in the mix. It just adds a nice width to it. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to actually add reverb to this track as well as delay to help give it more delay and width. So what we want to do now is we want to add some reverb to this track as well, and this will help give some more space with the stereo delay that we're actually using. There's different ways that you can use reverbs to make your song come to life. For this track specifically, what you can do when you mix, you can add the reverb as another insert on your sends, as another send. You can actually add it on your inserts if you want to. I don't practice that, but you can do it if you want. But what I want to do is I actually want to add this reverb to this stereo delay track, right? So I'm actually going to send this stereo delay track to the short Vox verb that I have, right? It's just a bus because nothing's on it, and it's right here. So the short Vox verb is right here, and we don't have anything on it, right? So what we're going to add is the Roomworks as the reverb, as our stock reverb for this tutorial, right? So what we're doing is we're actually sending the signal, right, that we have to our stereo delay to give us width. Then we're sending the stereo delay that gave us width to the reverb. So the reverb's not actually on the vocal, it's on the delay that's on the vocal. So it gives a different type of effect. For this song in particular, I didn't want to put the reverb on the vocal. I definitely liked hearing it more in the background, in the width sides of the mix versus directly on the vocal. But play around with these things, and be creative and give the effect that you really wanted to give. Oftentimes, I just like to stick around the 20 millisecond mark for reverb. So we'll just go there first. We'll adjust the size, the reverb time, and some of these other parameters just to give us the effect that we want. So let's hit play and start adjusting some of these knobs and hear how it sounds in the mix.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hands. Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent. Than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hands. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth.
So yeah, so that's how we add some reverb to the track. So let's just hit play and let's hear it and let's see what we got.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hands. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth.
So let's play the vocal without everything we did and then let's add it back in to see what kind of difference we made.
Easier to stay than to move on. Had me under your thumb for so long. Just kept telling me we would get through it. I was codependent and you knew it. You were selfish, you proved it. But I couldn't see the hands. Had me so blind, forgot how to pray. If they knew the truth,
what would they say?
So cool. I hope you found this video helpful. Just some simple plugins and tricks that you can use if you have stock plugins with Cubase and you want to enhance the vocal. I hope that some of these techniques work, some of these plugins work. Let me know what stock plugins that you use that work better for you and your situation. Also, in the description of this video below, you can download a document that will show you the plugins that I just used and the settings that I used as well to achieve this vocal. You can also download the pre-mix worksheet if you are struggling with getting your mixes correct before you send them off to your mixing engineer. I also have that down below as well as a whole bunch of other free. Basically, I'm just saying go to the description of the video. Yeah, but I hope you found this video helpful. I hope it increases your music. I'm Keef. Thank you so much for trusting me with your music. If you would, please hit the subscribe button, like button, and hit the notification bells to get more videos like this. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.